My name is Chuck, and listen, I am excited to be here. We do meet here. Our church meets here once a month. You probably don't even know how you partner with us, and so whether you like it or not, we're here. Okay, so it doesn't matter at this point if you do like it. Once a month, we meet here, and we basically use the stuff that you guys set up. You guys leave it out, and then we steal that for our thing at night. And I tell my church that I do it all. All right, and so. It's exciting, but for real, like getting to meet Adam has allowed me to feel sane. It's allowed me to feel like that there is someone else. Y'all are laughing because y'all know Adam. It's cool. It's allowed me to feel like what God has called me to do, that I didn't miss something. And so it's been cool to meet Adam and to eat and hang out. And then it was really weird the way that I even found out about this location and then found out about Adam. My son came here all summer to an after-school thing, and my wife came to a like an open house thing, and she sends me these pictures. She's like, "We have to be here." I was like, "Okay, I didn't even know this place existed. I know Cracker Barrel exists, and I didn't know that this place exists." So we are a church that meets primarily in homes, but once a month we come together and do what we call a gathering, and we do that here starting back in February. And so just know that you guys are a part of something else that's happening in the city, and you didn't even know it. But now that you do, once a month, we get a chance to be here and be a part of it. What I do know is most of you don't know me, and that's a good thing because there's no reason for you to know me. I want to show you a picture of my family, and here's why. Not that you care, okay? But it's like anybody else. You don't care, but it's like anybody else. It's like I want to show you my family because I think they're pretty, and I think it tells you a little bit about who we are. This is, my wife is Amy. She's a therapist. She's the one to the right. She is the only blonde in the family. Next to her is Deacon. He's a 5th grader. And then next to him is Wrigley. He's a 7th grader. And then the tall one in the back, that's Macon. She's a 10th grader. And then Ellie is an 8th grader. We have 4 kids and 4 schools. God has been very, very cool in how that he has brought our family together. Very, very, oh yeah, that's me. I'm Chuck. I just get to hang out and just put pretty people around you. That's what you should do. And so this is our family. God's been very creative in how he has brought us together through biological means, through adoption means. That adoption was, all of our adoption stories are weird. No one is ever going to put us up as the sexy adoption story and like the one on the poster, because all our stories are weird and will probably convince you to not ever adopt. So if you feel led to adopt, come and talk to me, because if you still feel led after that, you're my dude, all right? Then that's going to happen. But, man, I am excited to be here to tell you a little bit about me. I am an extrovert. My wife, the people that are laughing, I don't appreciate that. My wife is an introvert. She's an introvert with extroverted tendencies, okay? Deacon is a psychopath, okay? That's who Deacon is. He's an extrovert all the time. Wrigley is an introvert, okay? Wrigley will just disappear for about 8 hours. We're not really sure where he's at. He's just in his room, in a closet, hunkered down, just praying to Jesus that everyone will go away. Macon is an extrovert. She wants to play every sport. She has FOMO. We just took her to New York. She has a fear. We did everything. Like, I walked like 97 miles in New York. Like, it was crazy. And then Ellie is an extrovert too. And so what happens is Amy and Wrigley tend to pair up and just disappear on us. And I'm left with the 3 extroverts. But that's our family. Now, the thing that I've noticed, because my wife is a counselor, she's a therapist, she owns a therapy clinic here in the city, is we talk a lot about people. We talk a lot about, okay, what does it mean to be extroverted? Well, normally people mean that, like, hey, you're re-energized, you're ready to go because of being around people. Introverts are ready to go and re-energize by being by yourself, okay? So what's different is often before I met Amy and she discipled me in the ways of Amy, I just thought that introverts didn't want to be around people. I just thought that introverts were lonely, like they like to be alone. And what I've come to realize is that Amy and Wrigley, they are introverts and they are energized, but what they're doing is they're ready to be a part of community because they have had time by themselves. Me, I'm ready to be a part of community because I'm already around other people. Like, my wife makes fun of me all the time. She's like, you're kind of like a squirrel in some ways. And so that's why I relate a lot to Deacon. We're more biological than it even seems like we could be, because he really is my child, all right? But as I've thought about this and thought about our family, like we have different ways of going about kind of getting ready to be a part of community. Wrigley really does need time by himself. To be a part of our family, which is just psychopathic and loud, Wrigley needs a good 8 hours before he's ready to step into that. Amy, the same way. She'll just hide a bit. Where's your mom? She's like, well, I don't know. She's sitting in the car, just kind of getting ready for the day. Me, I walk in. I want to be a part of people, to be a part of community. And this idea in Acts, what you guys have been walking through about just, the church unleashed, I've got to walk that journey to some degree over the last couple of years because I've been a part of planting a church in a city, kind of like I told you with Adam, is just kind of doing some of the same similar type things. But as you guys have walked through the book of Acts and you've gotten up to Acts 18, I want to talk to you about these 11 verses because I feel like it gives an opportunity for you to see the way that community influenced what God was already doing. And so you've got Acts 18, and it's going to be up here. I'm going to tell you, they've done an incredible job putting these slides together. I'm going to jack it up, okay? I'm not going to probably stay like with it, but here's the deal with Paul, okay? Paul confuses me a little bit. A lot of people in the Bible confuse me to some degree. So Paul was in this place called Athens, and he leaves Athens, okay, and he comes to a place called Corinth. Now he meets, this is the prequel, okay? He meets some people called Priscilla and Aquila. They're a couple. I freaking love the name Aquila. I feel like if I could go back and get a fifth kid, Aquila's going to be in there somewhere. And just call him AQ and just deal with it. I'm not calling my daughter Priscilla because I knew a Priscilla in fifth grade and I hated her, okay? So that name is ruined for me all the time. Priscilla and Aquila, they leave Rome because this dude named Claudius, who was in charge of that area, he basically commands everybody that's a Jew has to leave Rome. So Priscilla and Aquila, they leave Rome, Italy, and they come down to Corinth. Paul leaves Athens. He comes to Corinth, and they meet. Here's what's incredible initially is their commonality is found because Priscilla and Aquila are tent makers. Like their job is to make tents. It sounds like a horrific job to me. Paul is a tent maker by trade. Now, he is on this journey. This whole passage of 18, Paul has these things that he calls missionary journeys, or that we have now called missionary journeys. This passage is in kind of like the middle toward the end of his second missionary journey, okay? Now, there's 3 big missionary journeys, and there's one to Rome, and then you just get a little theological and weird. Here's the deal. This is the second time Paul's gone out to do his stuff, okay? He meets Priscilla and Aquila, and there's this commonality that happens. And here's what it says in verse 18. It says, after this, Paul stayed many days longer. This is when they're all in Corinth. After this, Paul stayed many days longer and then took leave of the brothers. Now, another thing that you may or may not know, normally when Paul leaves a place, he has been booted out or threatened, or he's leaving to save his life. Paul is actually leaving at this point because they're going to leave Corinth. He's actually leaving because he wants to, which is weird for Paul. So after this, Paul stayed many days longer and then took leave of the brothers and, just so you know, and sisters, okay? It's the people that he's been around, and set sail for Syria. So he wants to go to his home church in Antioch. It'd be kind of like if you guys left and went to Colorado for a while, but you're like, now I'm coming back to Springdale and back to Hope City. Paul was on his way back to his home church and set sail for Syria, and with him Priscilla and Aquila. At Cenchreae, and I'm pretty sure I'm butchering that name. Pretty sure that's not even how you say it. But again, I really don't think it matters. At Cenchreae, he had cut his hair, for he was under a vow. Now, a couple things to know here. Paul has gotten a chance to hang out with Priscilla and Aquila because there's commonality in that they have the same trade. And so Paul actually begins to do life with Priscilla and Aquila. They actually do these jobs together, and then in his off time, he gets a chance to tell people about the risen Christ. He gets to tell how Jesus is the Messiah. So as Paul gets a chance to do this, Priscilla and Aquila, they gain trust with Paul because of the life that they are doing together. The community that they are bonding is allowing them to have an opportunity to get to know each other and then to work together and to have this kind of workplace bond and community. And then they get a chance to do this thing together, which is kind of announce this Jesus, announce the real Jesus. So Priscilla and Aquila, they gained a lot of trust. And then before he sailed, he cut his hair off. He was a part of this vow, which was most likely, again, something that you may or may not care about. It's probably a Nazirite vow. He was not doing it because he felt mandated by it. He wanted to be a part of this vow. And later on, he actually goes into the church in Jerusalem. He wants to be a part of it because he wants to show how sacred it is to be connected to God. It's for him. It's most likely a personal decision. No one was telling him, you have to do this vow. It was a personal decision for him to do. It'd be kind of like our church does the Seder meal, okay? I don't believe in the Bible it ever says you've got to do the Passover meal and you've got to eat onions and turnips and Worcestershire sauce and all that kind of stuff. I don't think that that's necessarily the case. We do it because we think it's an opportunity for us to be able to be connected to Jesus. I believe it's the same thing that Paul did. No one was mandating he has to do it. So what begins to happen is he sails, he had his hair cut off because of this vow. They arrive at Ephesus where Paul left Priscilla and Aquila. Now you may go, that doesn't sound like community to me. But if you think about it, it is community. They arrived at Ephesus where Paul left Priscilla and Aquila, and he himself went into the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. Now, this is what it says in verse 20. It says, when they asked him to stay, now that they is talking about the Jews that he had just been talking to. When they asked him to stay for a longer period, he declined. But on taking leave of them, he said, I will return to you if God wills, and he set sail from Ephesus. So if I'm Priscilla and Aquila, okay, there's a lot of immaturity in me. If I was like, listen, Paul, we just came together and now you're going and doing your own thing, but you're asking us to stay here, that doesn't sound a lot like community. But the truth is, because of what had been bonded in Corinth, because of what had happened there, because of the commonality and community, connection had occurred. And then when they got to a place, see, it's still community, because even though Paul was going this way, Paul wasn't necessarily lonely or by him. He went by himself, but he wasn't alone. Because everything that Paul did, there was a destination of community and connection that was awaiting him. It's the same thing with Priscilla and Aquila. We're about to see that God was doing something in Ephesus, had started something amazing, and Priscilla and Aquila were going to have an opportunity to be there and to continue it. And so the community that started when Priscilla and Aquila left Rome and came to Corinth, when Paul left Athens and came to Corinth, that community is the basis of everything that we're about to read in these next passages. See, what we get to understand is that we're not Paul. The main players in this is Paul. You got Priscilla and Aquila, and you got Apollos that we're about to read here in a second. We're not them. You're not them, okay? God doesn't expect you to be Apollos. God doesn't expect you to be Priscilla and Aquila. I'm not going to ask Amy to change her name to Priscilla, and I'm not going to start going by Aquila. That's not the deal. What we get a chance to look at here is to look in what are we able to learn from these examples that we see, and how are we able to take that and apply it to what we walk into when we leave the church this Sunday. So as you continue to read, it says this in verse 20. When they asked him to stay for a longer period, he declined. Okay, so what we know is that Priscilla and Aquila are staying. Paul is going to go on. He's already talked to the Jews that are there in the synagogue. Verse 21, but on taking leave of them, he said, I will return to you if God wills. And he set sail from Ephesus. Then you get to verse 22. When he landed at Caesarea, he went up and greeted the church, which most likely means when he greeted the church that he fulfilled the Nazirite vow. That he went and he consecrated, he was a part of the vow. He did what he needed to do. Again, that personal decision to want to be close and connected to Jesus. So when he landed at Caesarea, he went up and greeted the church and then went down to Antioch. Remember, this is his home church, Antioch in the area of Syria. Verse 23, after spending some time there, he departed and went from one place to the next through the region of Galatia and Phrygia. Again, I have no clue if that's the way that you really say it. Strengthening all the disciples. Again, some may say, it seems like Paul is not a part of community. It seems like Paul is not setting up community, but the truth is, Paul may be by himself going to these places, but his destination always includes community. His destination always includes community. What is he doing when he gets there? He traveled from place to place, strengthening all of the disciples. Paul had this idea at one point that even though he had been one place, he would try to, at times, he would swing back by in the places that he had helped plant or start, he would swing back by and try to strengthen. He would swing back through and try to help them with it. So what you're beginning to see this is that the community that Paul was building was helping to build the church. It was helping to build the church in Ephesus through Priscilla and Aquila that we'll see here in a second with Apollos. He's beginning to strengthen the places that he's already been because his destination always included community. And then I think about my life. Whether I am by myself doing something or whether I'm with my family or whether I'm with my church, the destination that God has put in front of me, do I always include community in that destination? Do I always include the idea of, hey, I want to not only be a part of community, I want to strengthen community when I get there? What Paul does here, as he goes from place to place, he strengthens all the disciples that he meets with. See, I don't believe that Acts 18, verses 18 through 28 is a prescription to what we need to do. I think it's a description. It's a description that gives an example of what community looks like and how the church and how people can be reached through that community. You've got Paul and you've got Priscilla and Aquila, and then at this point, you've got Priscilla and Aquila that are still in Ephesus, and you've got Paul who is on his way to Antioch, and when he gets to Antioch, he goes on to the Galatia, and that other word, strengthening everybody that he comes to be a part. And then you get to verse 24. It says, now a Jew named Apollos, a native of Alexandria, came to Ephesus. Remember, Priscilla and Aquila are still there, the tent makers with the worst job ever. He was an eloquent man, competent in the scriptures. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. If my wife describes something, I don't know that I appreciate the fact that, hey, he's a competent husband, okay? I don't know that I would love for my family to be going around and going, daddy's competent. He's a competent daddy. You know what I'm saying? I don't know that I would want my church saying, Chuck is a competent leader. Like, the word sounds like it's great. Like, you're just go, okay, that's competent. But it kind of sounds like a slam. If I call you competent, what I'm really saying is, I hate you and everything that you do. That's kind of that's what we're saying. Now, I don't think that's the case here. I'm just giving you a little bit of the brokenness that is inside my brain, okay? So Apollos, he's in Ephesus. He was an eloquent man, competent in the scriptures. Basically, he was well-versed in what had been written up to this point, okay? He was well-versed in what had been written about the Old Testament. He was well-versed in what had been written, and he knew enough about Jesus that he had heard of John the Baptist, and that we're going to see that here in verse 25. He had been instructed in the way of the Lord, and being fervent in spirit. Okay, I didn't know this, but being fervent in spirit basically means that you're bubbling over with enthusiasm. If you've ever been around someone who is bubbling over with enthusiasm, it either endures you to them or makes you want to punch them in the face. It depends on what they're bubbling over with. When my kids come home bubbling over with enthusiasm, it depends on what it is. Not that I ever want to punch them in the face, but sometimes I really do want them to get away from me, okay? Because your enthusiasm, I'm not matching your enthusiasm. But yet, and those of you with parents, you know sometimes you just gaslight your kids to the point they're like, oh, that's great. Please leave my presence so I can go binge watch my show on Netflix or something like that. But that word here, that phrase here, fervent in spirit, literally means to bubble over with enthusiasm. This is what Apollos, this is where he's at. He is so excited about teaching and sharing what he knows up to this point about Jesus that being fervent in the spirit, he is bubbling over. He spoke, and this is important, he spoke and taught accurately the things concerning Jesus, though he knew only the baptism of John. What we know about Apollos up to this point is he was not aware yet of the fullness of who Jesus was. He was not yet aware of the big story that included Jesus. Just the full person of Christ, he was not there yet. He knew a lot of the scriptures. He knew about John the Baptist, and he knew enough about him. But it's important to say that he spoke and taught correctly the things concerning Jesus, that which he knew. And then remember, he's the one that's kind of like the preacher. And then in verse 26, it says, he began to speak boldly in the synagogue. So he's speaking what he knows, and he is speaking boldly. But when Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they took him and explained to him the way of God more accurately. Now imagine this. You're in Ephesus. You were preaching and speaking correctly and accurately the things that you were aware of in the scriptures and the things that you were aware of about Jesus. And then Priscilla and Aquila, remember, they had been community with Paul. They had done life with them. They had lived together for about 18 months. Okay, so they had done life together. They had done ministry together. They had seen Paul, who is definitely the OG of like the Mount Rushmore of people in the Bible of what they've done. They've been able to experience that level of community. Paul trusted him. Paul trusted them. He went on to develop community and to strengthen the disciples as he went on from Antioch. He left Priscilla and Aquila to continue community because he trusted what God was doing and what he had been doing and what they had been a part of. So Priscilla and Aquila come up to Apollos and they pulled him aside. This happens to me in ministry all the time. Especially, I was a student pastor before I started the collective, and I felt like people all the time were like, "Oh, come here, little boy. Like, here, let me explain this stuff to you." So, I mean, I've been in these situations, but basically Priscilla and Aquila, who knew more, remember, they had walked around with Paul and done life, made tents, and done ministry for 18 months. And they explained the way of God more accurately. That's community. They came around someone who had passion. They came around someone who knew everything that they did up to a certain point, and they were correct in what they were saying, but they didn't know the full picture. And Priscilla and Aquila, who had been in community with Paul, who had seen community happen as God had begun to do stuff in Ephesus, pulled in Apollos and said, and I don't know exactly what the conversation would have been like, but basically was like, "You're doing so good. We just want to walk with you. We want to give you a fuller picture." And they gave him more of an accurate look and approach of who God was. And then when he wished to cross to Achaia, the brothers encouraged him, talking about Apollos, and wrote to the disciples to welcome him. And when he arrived, he greatly helped those through who grace had believed, for he powerfully refuted the Jews in public, showing by the scriptures that the Christ was Jesus. So the end game in this, through Paul having community with Aquila and Priscilla, leaving to go continue community and to build up community and to strengthen disciples on his way when he got done with Antioch, is leaving Priscilla and Aquila here to be able to then pull in Apollos in community. And then what happens is it says at the very end, for he powerfully refuted the Jews in public, showing by the scriptures that he was competent in, that he now has a fuller picture of, showing by the scriptures that the Christ was Jesus. So what has community gained? Or what has community led to? We've seen Paul, who's kind of famous for kind of going around and doing this stuff. We've seen Paul establish community. What this helps me think through is, what community do I need to be a part of that is leading toward people understanding who Christ really is, the real Jesus? Not the storybook Jesus, not just the Jesus of Easter or the Jesus of Christmas, but where am I in community? Where do I need to be in community that are helping people create new communities that helps people come to understand that Christ is Jesus? So that's really the question I have for you this morning, because I find myself, even though I am in quote unquote ministry, I find myself not taking advantage of the community that I'm in, and find myself not taking advantage of the communities that I should be in. You know, this idea of Church Unleashed, the study of Acts. The Church Unleashed is really people committed to God unleashed. So what we get to look at is, again, not a prescription out of these 11 verses. We get to see a description of the way that community led to people finding out about the real Jesus. And that's what we get to then ask, okay, because the book of Acts was written by a guy named Luke. It was written so we could understand the historical perspective of what God did in the early church and the early believers. Like, we get a chance to actually read that and kind of see what is happening. But we didn't live when this is not 53 AD or whatever, whenever this was written. This is 2022. I'm not Paul. I'm not Apollos. I'm not Priscilla and Aquila. So what does this mean for us? We're able to look at examples of what Jesus did through Paul, through Priscilla and Aquila, in community, and then we get to ask ourselves this question. Am I in community that is allowing people to understand the real Jesus? And I think that's where we get to end this part of the morning, which is just to evaluate, am I in community that's allowing people to see the real Jesus? So I know at this point in the morning, you guys get an opportunity to pray and to spend time doing the Lord's Supper. And it's an incredible opportunity to just take the time and to just be able to hang out with Jesus. To think through, okay, this passage, not what Chuck has said, but to think through this passage in Acts. It was written to tell a story. Then what do I take out of it? How do I walk forward in obedience through these 11 verses? So as we take this time to pray, and as you have an opportunity to take the Lord's Supper, if you choose to take the Lord's Supper at this time, what I'd love for you to have an opportunity to do is just as you remember what Jesus has done for us on the cross, especially as we walk toward in a couple of weeks the Easter season, is to think about, okay, this Jesus that I'm remembering, the real Jesus, what are ways that I can be or need to be in community that are helping people see the real Jesus? Am I already in those communities? Am I not realizing that there's some communities that I'm in where I get a chance to come around people I work with, like Priscilla and Aquila and Paul, where I'm doing the same thing and get to be in community? Are there areas where I realize that maybe some people go this way and maybe some people stay and go this way, but to realize that the community that's been built has strengthened us to the point that when other people come in like Apollos, we get to surround them and to bring them into community with the hope that at the end, people understand the real Jesus. So I hope that you would just be able to take this opportunity just to think through the community that you have in your life. Community could be friends and family and work. Community could be church. Community could be within your own home. It could be your neighborhood. But areas in your life where you are just realizing that, man, there are opportunities for us to help people see the real Jesus through this community. So I'm going to pray, and then you guys are going to have an opportunity just to experience the Lord's Supper and to spend time just kind of evaluating and thinking through the way that we are to respond to these 11 verses out of Acts 18. So Jesus, I pray that you will be with us this morning. I pray that actually you will be with us later today, that we'll have an opportunity just to think through the way that we are to walk forward in community and do life together and with others to help people see the real Jesus. I pray, Jesus, that you will kind of allow us to even have faces and names come up in our brains right now of people that need to be invited to the next couple of Sundays, to bring them into community with what you're already doing. So, Jesus, we thank you, and we pray believing that there are communities of people that need to be reached in Northwest Arkansas that need to know the real Jesus.